Thank you for joining the online discussion presenting the work of practitioners in contemporary composition who've spent time at Sweeney's Bothy on Egg this year. I'm going to start the event just with the kind of basic housekeeping and get that out of the way. The event will be recorded and made available online in our library of talks. The closed caption function in Zoom is operating and you can enable it at the bottom of your screen. It would be great if those in the audience who are happy to keep their cameras on do so, so that the event is kind of convivial and kind of friendly. It's always nicer to speak to a room full of people or even a Zoom room full of people. And we ask that all but the speakers mute their mics through the kind of the main part of the event. Questions can be put in the chat at any time, and but we'll kind of ask them at the end, kind of all together, kind of at the end. And if you want to ask your question in person, that's absolutely fine as well. So now over to the event proper. Thank you for joining this online discussion presenting the work of practitioners in contemporary composition who spent time on residency at Sweeney's Bothy on the island of Egg. Max Farrell, Soojin Chang, Rubie Green, Arun Sood and the BICC, who are Kunling Lee, Jacob Fulford and Riyad Bouassab, are all here tonight, except I think Soojin is maybe a bit late. So do the speakers want to kind of just switch their mics on and say hi?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, hello, hello.
So hopefully Soojin will kind of be able to kind of join us just in due course. So the opportunity for those working in contemporary composition was open to those working in all genres of music, writing original compositions from multiple musicians, voices, and other sonic material. Applicants had to be UK-based and have between 3 and 6 years of professional experience. And we asked that they hadn't had a work performed at significant scale, so that there was a kind of the practitioners have absolutely kind of shown kind of commitment to their practice, but are kind of still kind of like working through the varied kind of opportunities that come before them. So tonight we're really pleased to also be joined by Richy Carey, who, along with the cellist Simone Seals and composer and educator Emily Doolittle, were the selection panel for the kind of opportunity, and kind of got involved in the kind of process back in the spring. Richy is a sound artist and composer who lives on the island of Skye, and he works collaboratively with artists and communities to create soundtracks and soundscapes. Richy, do you want to say hello and kind of just say a little bit about the process of the kind of selection and your response to that kind of back in the spring?
Yes, I do. Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name's Richy, and yeah, it's just a total privilege to be like invited to get to listen, but to such a wide array of music by like my peers, you know. I don't know how everyone else finds it, but when you're making things, it's quite hard to then make time later on for listening to, you know, new things. And I think a lot of what I end up listening to is kind of given to me by algorithms, you know. So it was a real pleasure to like just kind of get to not just to hear this amazing music that's been made by people right across the country, but also to actually get to like read a bit about everyone's process, because, you know, those two things go hand in hand. And yeah, just a really like, it was huge as well. There was so much to listen to, and it was a really hard like discussion that we had. We ended up talking for almost a day and a half, I think, about it, because there was just so much to think through. But I think what we actually landed upon was everyone that was selected were something that everyone had really plucked out. But it was actually quite shared. There wasn't really too much I don't know, fractious discussion afterwards, because we all just kind of thought, yeah, those are the people that pop for us all, you know. So yeah, just a privilege to listen to, and I'm just really buzzing to hear how it went as well, and hear more about how things have been going for everyone. So yeah, thanks for having us. And
thank you for joining us, kind of Carey, and thanks to Richy, and thanks for all your kind of hard work like back in the springtime, because yeah, it was we were really honoured to kind of receive so many applications, and we could have, you know, the kind of the strength of the applications could have filled kind of, you know, double, triple, quadruple kind of residencies kind of as we were kind of going through. So yeah, like there will be more opportunities in the future. So but today we're kind of looking at the ones that kind of happened in 2023. So I'll just do a quick introduction to Bothy Project, because I'm guessing there might be some kind of international kind of people kind of in the audience kind of who might not know so much about Bothy Project. And I think between the different presenters, there's a number of, I think, kind of videos and kind of images kind of coming up. So that'll give a kind of sense of how the kind of, how both Sweeney's Bothy on Egg and the island of Egg itself kind of looks, kind of hopefully. So along with these kind of, these words and the images kind of coming up, you'll kind of, all the kind of blanks will be kind of filled in. So Bothy Project is an independent charitable arts organisation. We operate in a set of rural contexts. We provide creative residencies in bespoke, small-scale, off-grid spaces in Scotland. We currently run Sweeney's Bothy on the island of Egg, on the west coast. And until earlier this year, we ran Inshriach Bothy in the Cairngorms National Park, which was active for 10 years. So in that time, there's been over 400 practitioners go on residency. We're working on a number of exciting new partnerships and plans for new Bothys, both in the Cairngorms National Park and elsewhere in Scotland. Inshriach Bothy was imagined and built originally by Bobby Niven, who's an artist, and architect Ian MacLeod, and used an RSA Residency for Scotland award, collaborating with Edinburgh Sculpture Workshop and its members to bring it into kind of existence. Sweeney's Bothy, located on the Isle of Egg, was also designed and built by Bobby Niven and Ian MacLeod, alongside artist Alec Finlay, and that was part of Creative Scotland's Year of Natural Scotland 2013. So we host creative residencies for practitioners in visual arts, craft and design, music, literature and performance, as well as thinkers, researchers and people who live close by each Bothy. We've got 5 residency strands. Creative practitioner, so you guys that are speaking tonight were part of that strand. We also have self-directed residencies. We have partnership residencies with other arts organisations, and we have neighbourhood residencies which operate for the people who live close to the Bothys and don't need to be visual artists, so don't need to be artists or officially kind of professional kind of creative people. And then we're also beginning a strand called Fieldwork, which is for researchers, academics and other experts investigating landscape in its widest sense, who will also benefit from time at the Bothy and are keen to share their research with the audiences that are part of the kind of the network of Bothy Project, which are obviously wide-spanning, kind of outside necessarily kind of academic fields. So the aim of our residencies is to allow residents to explore creativity, landscape and living simply. This event concludes a series of residencies supported by Creative Scotland via Creative Scotland Open Fund Award. And the whole award has seen 5 visual artists based in Scotland, 6 writers of non-fiction and 7 composers from across the UK journey to Egg and spend time at Sweeney's Bothy. This event is also part of our public programme, which includes in-discussion events which bring together cohorts of residents from our various strands to share and discuss their work and research. So now on to the composers. So the first up is Max Farrell. So Max is a visual artist, scientist and composer of experimental music. His artistic work traverses video, electroacoustic and instrumental composition, improvised performance and sculpture. Across disciplines and media, he interrogates the intersections between material, informatic and cognitive dimensions of documentation, perceptions of place at varying physical and temporal scales, and processes by which humans restructure natural environments. So using a mix of emerging and obsolete technologies to create novel realities, he explores how archiving, curation, randomness, and alteration of scale shape our experience. So I'd like to welcome Max to take hold for the next kind of 10 to 15 minutes. Thanks, Max.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, that was a great introduction. So I don't need to say so much about my practice, but I just wanted to start by saying that, yeah, a major pillar of my musical composition is really improvisation and my reaction to sort of inner and outer landscapes, physical, social, emotional. And I often work with sort of translating information and concepts, usually across different media. And so my earliest compositions were all kind of solo guitar, and this evolved into playing in lots of collaborative projects in Montreal, including some more ambient and more heavier kind of post-rock motoric bands. The first piece I wanted to share to give a sense of this kind of practice is from the band Blessings Infinity, where we use these propulsive, repetitive bass lines that we then improvise around. And this project was my first attempt to sort of make videos that directly pair with music. So let's see this. So in that project, I sort of want to start with that to give this idea that often I think about landscape as this sort of pseudo psychedelic experience. So as you move across the landscape, either slowly or rapidly, you can kind of shut your eyes and almost find new places in the blink of an eye. And then another side of my compositional experience or past has been trying to merge my artistic work with my work as a scientist. So to play with agency as sort of a composer and further this idea of translation, I've done a bit of work with data sonification, which is creating pieces as direct translations of ecological data. And I'm just show a very quick version of this project, which is called Waterhole Music. And so that goes on and on. It's about 2 weeks worth of time lapse information that, when presented, would be put on a loop. And so I thought that's a nice experiment that really, reinforces this translation and re-encapsulation of landscape but it really removes the complete improvisational practice, which is central to a lot of my work. So the last sort of historical piece I want to show or share is from a long-term kind of serialized performance project called Co-opt Radio, where I do improvised sampling and layering of live radio to sort of make these woven dreamscapes. And in this way, it becomes a kind of highly site and time specific project. I'm performing this project on December 1st in Glasgow at Old Hairdresser. If people are interested. Let me share. So coming from this kind of background, mixed different projects, different approaches to composition. On Egg at the Bothy, my plan was really to sort of try and reject this idea of composing from outward material and come back to my inner voice. I think the pitch I had was like listening to the inner earworm or something like this. And so through a series of kind of walking meditations and exploring the island, use this as a way to listen to my own inner voice and try singing and overlaying. And I realized, very quickly, I can't really sing as well as I thought I could. And that perhaps, reflecting back on my process as a composer, this is actually very unlike what I normally do. Most of my compositions draw directly or indirectly from source materials or sort of rigid compositional processes that I then explore. And so on Egg, I really started using the landscape as a direct reference for music. I did this by walking and humming melodies based on sounds that I heard, overdubbing them, taking field recordings. I would bring instruments like small keyboards out with me to play and record while sitting in the environment. And I even did some voice notes where I described just in words how I might translate features of the landscape and the frame directly into sound. And of course, I was actually completely enraptured by Egg, and I had some amazing weather. So I took a lot of videos, and I ended up burning the candle heavily at both ends. So I'd hike all day and then work very late at night, editing the footage that I shot, making tracks that incorporated some of the bits of audio and recordings from the day, doing overdubs, and then kind of doing this iteratively, almost making video and audio that were sort of meant to be played together. And so the next piece that I was going to share is something I made on Egg. I haven't revisited it since. It might be the only time I share it with anyone. it's quite different from my other work, but it kind of reflects the kind of serenity and the perception of scale that I experienced while on egg. And so just in the last few minutes, I wanted to share that, you know, I took all this video and I was exploring egg and I made all this music. Some of the video I ended up using in a music video for someone I met while on egg, Johnny Lynch of Lost Map Records. And so this idea of community and landscape really transcended even the residency in a beautiful way. But as I talked to people like Johnny and my hosts and different people I met on the island, I often got advice about places to visit. And people told me that I should go to Massacre Cave, which is where the entire inhabitants of Egg were murdered. And if I was really, really quiet, I would be able to hear the people who were murdered singing, the ghosts singing in the cave. And so as I walked along this cliff edge, I started hearing this music. Sounds a bit freaky, but it went ooh, 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 and I was totally freaked out. I was looking around and I realized that the sound was coming from this. And this is a post that people use to build sheep fencing. And when the wind blows at the right angle, this small little hole kind of becomes like a vibrational membrane and essentially becomes a wind-powered flute. And so I was thinking that a really nice analogy sort of between these modern farming implements, these posts are essentially the standing stones, one of which is depicted here on Egg. And so moving forward, I may revisit some of the work I just showed and some of my compositions and video on egg, but something I think would be nice to do as a follow-up project would be to develop maybe an installation where you build a modern kind of analog of the standing stone circle using these sheep fence posts, essentially building a wind-powered flute. So I've been doing some research about traditional ways of making wind-powered flutes, usually traditionally out of bamboo, but how to convert these to sort of galvanized steel posts. And ultimately, the idea would be that this results in sort of a sculpture that's also a piece that is generatively creates music that responds directly to the wind and the landscape on egg. So just that's some of the flavor of what I got up to, and hopefully a way that this will change my practice moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. That was really great to kind of get a sense of kind of what you were kind of letting go by by making the journey kind of to egg, and then kind of I suppose kind of moving out of your I don't know, kind of habits or kind of conventions. And but you do have a kind of sculptural, the fact that there's kind of images kind of that you unite your kind of audio kind of production with kind of images is the new idea that's kind of sculptural. Is this the first foray kind of into sculpture that you're kind of making, or has that kind of happened in your practice before?
Yeah, I've done some, I guess, like sculpture in the sense of like video installation. So I've done some live video and sort of systems for doing live and reactive video, but it's completely separate from the music composition. So I think, yeah, this would be a new way, a new style of work for me. This sort of making almost like a permanent site-specific installation, and then also tying that into the music composition, because I think some of the major choices to be made for that kind of piece would be, what kinds of scales and what kinds of tones and materiality really reflect kind of that landscape. So I think the next major question is not just how might I build this, but sort of how can I justify what scales or what notes to tune the pipes to. But yeah, this would be a new foray for me.
That's maybe more dramatic than I was anticipating. Richie?
Thank you so much for that. That was like super interesting, like a pure whirlwind tour of like you're up to so many interesting things. I guess I've got a few things that really popped in my head what you were saying. I loved what you said about egg maybe making you think of perceptions of scale, because it seems that you have this like really polyvocal practice, right? You're talking about sculpture, you kind of like you're working through kind of translations of data, and I guess like you have. Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you about how these different like lenses of like your work, and yourself, like how they kind of inform your work. Like, do they open up certain aspects of what you're interested in different ways? And yeah, if you could just kind of explain a bit about that, maybe if that's all right.
Yeah. I guess the perception of scale is originally for me was most evident making video, trying to think about, how we can warp time, like just changing warping of time or perspective. Some of the video I showed with this music from Egg, I was picking places to set the camera that it looked like there are these gargantuan valleys and a big river flowing out to the sea, but that little image was actually only like that big. It's basically like a pond. So almost like playing with this idea of you're not sure quite where you are, but it's this like impressive landscape nonetheless. And then on the musical side, I've explored some of that perception scale mostly with the radio sampling project, where it's essentially it feels like, you take these fragments, sometimes micro samples of like 10 milliseconds. And if you take a sample that's small enough, it becomes almost a pure tone. And so you can kind of find these melodies and find these kinds of harmonies by layering very small fragments of sound. And then it's, eventually not sure what's a sample and what's what's a melody that was on the radio and what was a melody that was created through sampling. And so, yeah, I think that's something I find pretty interesting. The other thing I did, I've never used autotune before. I don't really sing, but in that piece I was sort of singing a bit, and I found that there were like birds singing in the background, and they got auto-tuned in the in the process of me singing. So I think things like that are kind of fun, almost scale it in multiple uses of the word.
Thank you.
That's great. Richie, do you want to dive in with one more kind of?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have quite a lot, but yeah, but yeah, I mean, I guess one of my other things was thinking, because you're talking there about like, auto-tune, and I think it felt like a lot from what I heard there, like really quite like large, like kind of like Vangelis sizey kind of synth type sound, and I guess I was wondering, especially when watching that kind of the project you did at the Waterhole, like how you think about, like, I guess like translating not just like the land that you're hearing in terms of like the kind of data that you use, but also your kind of choice of instrumentation, and I know that's just an aesthetic or partly aesthetic, but yeah, to talk a little bit about that as well, that was all right.
Yeah, I think instrumentation is quite interesting. I think I started as a guitar player, and I kind of tend towards more, I guess, acoustic instruments. And so for the Waterhole music piece, I think, yeah, the choice of instrumentation, that mapping was all about pitch and velocity and timing relative to what the data had. But yeah, the choice of instrumentation is almost completely arbitrary. So for that piece, because it's so percussive, I designed a new instrument that's actually based on emulations of instruments that would be found in South Africa, like modern, but like digital versions of like basically tubular wooden, like kind of xylophone type things, and also micro samples of choirs, so of people singing. So it wasn't really necessarily obvious, but for me there was some informed intention choice about what the instrumentation there is. And then for the stuff on Egg, it was more a practicality of what I could carry. So when I went hiking, I had this like tiny little backpack synthesizer, which is like makes this kind of like epic sound if you layer it over and over again, and then voice. And then you can't hear it in that piece, but I also have an antique banjo that was made in Birmingham in the turn of the century that I brought with me. So these kinds of, I was constrained by like the physicality of needing to carry these things. But then, yeah, the landscape sort of asked for these kinds of Vangelis style ambient immersive soundscapes.
Thanks so much, Max and Richie, kind of there. So I think now we should probably press on with Soojin Chang, who I think I saw kind of arrive. It's great to have you. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Soojin.
Am I echoing? No.
Is that because you've logged in twice?
Yes. One second. Okay, how is that?
That's better.
Okay, my computer camera doesn't work, so I have to use two devices.
That's okay, that's fine. That's working nicely.
Yeah, so I guess my microphone works, but anyway, hello.
It's no problem. That's all fine. It's good to see you, Soojin, and sorry you missed the kind of top of the kind of like the introductions, but it was mostly all stuff that you know. But I'll just introduce you kind of briefly here and then hand over to you. Is that okay? Okay, that's super. Okay, so Soojin is a Korean non-binary performance artist, filmmaker and researcher who lives in Glasgow and works internationally. Using their body as technology to transmute invisibility, Chang's practice reflects on colonial inheritance and trans-species reliances. Their ritual experiments investigate hybrid ontologies. So on Egg, Soojin focused on their sonic practice using recordings made with collaborator Sam Karuga, a noise musician from Nairobi, who is a member of the industrial grindcore duo Juma. So I'll hand over to Soojin to tell us about her practice and what she worked on Egg. Thanks, Soojin.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, everyone, also for taking time to come tonight. So the desire going into the residency was to explore the role of live performance, and in particular, recording live improvised performance outdoors, the role it plays in the communion with non-human beings, in listening to, being possessed by, calling out to, playing with, and attuning to non-human beings. So every day we hiked. I think the height and carrying the heavy weight of our equipment was part of the process. It was like the part of the recording process almost began there. We had a Micro Freak synthesizer. It's quite light, and we used a geophone, which detects, translates seismic activity into sound. And so, you know, we put it into the ground, we put it in between rocks, put it on me, like it takes like the heartbeat, and if you like scream or speak quite loudly, it detects it as well. And we also went to the wind turbines and magnetically attached it into the turbines, and we played the turbines. As many of you may know, Egg is sustainably energized. Yes. So as for non-human beings, it's firstly beyond words that can be contained to this meeting. The one thing that was strongly present was grandmother energy. My own grandmothers, I spoke to them in kind of a rally, like getting them ready to start a group dance. I also felt the spiritual presence of a lot of women elders who labor and labored to build Egg, in particular amongst the hills there. My mother's in Upper Greenland, and especially, I felt their presence. My mother's family is from the islands of Korea, so there's also a song that came to me on many days there. It's a song that's sung by Haenyeo, which is translates to like sea woman, but they are these divers that dive underwater for to catch fish and other shellfish without any equipment. And so it's a long generation of divers, and there's songs that they sing to get through the hardships of island life and colonized life. And there's a song that sings of an island called Iodo that fishermen would dream of and would many times die out at sea trying to reach this other land that was meant to be this haven, but it may or may not have existed actually in physical form. And in Egg, I similarly felt there has been a vision there to create a life that doesn't exist elsewhere. And I really felt both the heartbreak and the bliss, the love and the labor involved in that. So now I'll play a 9-minute song. Everything we did out there was improvised. And I couldn't really make out what I was doing when I was actually playing out there, but at the end, I think we have an album, like we created quite a lot. So I'll play a 9-minute song. It's called Infinite Rubie. Feel free to turn your gaze slightly away from the screen or to close your eyes or whatever you want to do to listen. Okay. It is a kind of noisy song, but I hope that it doesn't get further distorted from Zoom, but maybe actually that would be cool. Okay, computer audio. Let me just play it a little bit and you could tell me if you hear it and then I'll start it from the beginning. Can you hear that? Okay, awesome. I'll play from the beginning. Okay. I think I'm back. All right. Thank you so much. I realized when listening that I didn't explain everything we had. We didn't just have a synth and a geophone. We had a granular sampler. We also had some chimes that we attached a geophone to. It's kind of one of the like breaking sounds that you hear. And a drum machine and a shun, which is an ancient Chinese instrument that's similar to an ocarina, and mine's shaped like an owl. Yeah, I think that's it. Some mics, some microphones.
That was totally great, Soojin. Thank you. I mean, that was kind of like, it was kind of epic within 9 minutes. Like there was this kind of yeah, kind of chapters within the kind of within the single song. It was kind of yeah, it was exciting to kind of listen to. Richy, maybe I'll kind of let you kind of come in with the first question, if you can.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much, Soojin. That was amazing. Like, yeah, such texture, you know, and also the kind of leading on from kind of what you're saying about, yeah, a kind of slightly meditative feeling that you kind of had when you were there. I was wondering about that, about your practice in general. I know you spoke about ritual being a big part of, I guess, what you think through, and I was kind of wondering about your kind of daily ritual, like compositionally, when you were in egg or on egg, and I'm kind of off that, like how, if there was anything you kind of took away from there, because I liked what you said there about this kind of vision to create a life that doesn't exist elsewhere, and if there were kind of like patterns of behavior or recording or processes that you kind of found when you were an egg that you've kind of taken away with you that have changed how you listen or make.
Okay, yeah, thank you. For the question in terms of rituals of being an egg, we would pack up every day, and that was a whole process on its own. So many leads, so many missing parts, and then we would walk for a long time. As you must know, in egg, for visitors there's no cars, so it was, you know, sometimes you could find Charlie, sometimes you can't find Charlie, who is the sole taxi driver in egg, full of wonderful stories. So yeah, we would walk, and then we would be exhausted, and then set up, and then play. That was the ritual, and then we'd pack up and go home and listen, and then do it all over again. That was it. It was pretty simple. I think rituals can be actually really simple, but I think that the walk itself, like it was quite taxing and like incredibly, you know, beautiful. It's like quite psychedelic in egg. It's a lot to take in. So I think that was already working through us as we got there. And then once we were there, a lot of it was also like just playing around and trying to hear while being outdoors when there's so much, you know, there's so much actually going on. So that's what I mean about like I couldn't actually hear myself a lot of times. So pleasantly surprised with how things turned out every night. In terms of what I took away from it, I think that's a really hard question because I'm still processing what it means to convene with non-human beings through sound, because it is an auditory process, but for me something that comes to mind is visibility, and it's visibility that's happening like beyond, like with our eyes, and it's something that's also beyond memory. Some sort of collapsing of maybe not collapsing, but like a way to have attunement into for example like combined quantum realms that happens through the mechanics of sorry, not the mechanics, the metaphysics of playing music, and also I think actively trying to listen to music at the same time. And I do believe that non-human beings are existing through those realms that we can't see with our eyes, but we can have attunement to and a kind of sight in different ways. And I think with sound also something that feels I took away from it is that it's such a physical process. I was talking to my collaborator recently about how just on the topic of like even like I think he was talking about like people who have gone deaf from natural disasters, creating such loud sound that people like whole cities would go deaf. And but then on that note of like earthquakes and volcanoes, how we don't necessarily have to like have hearing to hear it, but like we can still feel it. And it's like being touched through sound and through non-human beings, is something that I'm really, really grateful to have learned through this process, and I'm continuing to learn about it. Yeah.
Soojin, you'd already been to Egg, I think, before you did this residency.
Sorry.
I think you'd already visited Egg once.
I've been there twice.
Before the residency. Oh, yeah, more than once. Okay.
Yes, I went there twice. Actually, it was the first place that I traveled to in Scotland.
And were you kind of on your first visits to the island, did you have the kind of sense of the characters that you went on to work in relation to kind of on the residency? Did you have a sense of them when you first visited the island?
What do you mean?
Like were you attuned to the
beings,
the beings?
I guess perhaps through my experience visiting Egg as well as other parts of Scotland, I've maybe learned that attunement through time. I'm guessing it worked through me, but yeah. Also, I should mention what I was just talking about with my collaborators and volcanoes and earthquakes. It was a conversation I had with Casimir, who's in a group called Gabra Modus Operandi. Just wanted to like properly cite him.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. I think there's probably kind of conversations to have for you to have with Max, because his kind of experience kind of going towards Massacre Cave. I mean, he didn't actually say if he kind of got there, but there's maybe some parallels there. But if we can kind of push on through, and then kind of at the end there will be kind of like hopefully some minutes for kind of a shared conversation. So next, if I could introduce Rubie Green. Thank you so much, Soojin. So Rubie is a songstress, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and unbridled trans voice. Ranging from power ballads to twitch pop to drone folk, her writing presents a slippery manifesto for transness and plots queer escapes to new unlikely homes. Rubie's debut solo album, Take Both, was released in 2020, and she's currently working on her forthcoming EP, Whatever Cage, co-produced with Toby Burrows, which might have been released.
Yeah, it's out now. It's out now.
Right, buy it. Aside from her solo work, she also plays xylophone in pop outfit Jenny Moore's Mystic Business and feminist punk choir F Star Choir. So on Egg, Rubie began to write a brand new body of work based on Virginia Woolf's Orlando, and I'll hand over to Rubie to tell us about that now.
Hiya. Yeah, so you're catching me kind of wandering the streets of Mayfair, which is a bit random in London. So hopefully you can all hear me. Is that okay? It's kind of reflecting my like sort of strange like kind of perambulatory time on the residency. So yeah, I suppose a lot of my work I kind of think of as being about like taking you know, the potential of like liberatory song really seriously, and actually like the craft of songwriting very seriously. I feel like I identifying a songwriter is like quite uncool in like the even in like kind of, I guess, sort of, you know, I think both in sort of like compositional circles and in like even like kind of indie music slash sort of, I don't know, whatever you call it, sort of circles. And like I really sort of believe in songwriting as a space where true like kind of liberation and decolonization and transformation can happen. So yeah, that's a lot of what I'm trying to do in all my work. And the project that I brought to Egg was and still is like very much in its kind of germinating early stages. It started really from not like being a sort of big fan of the Virginia Woolf novel Orlando and thinking, you know, kind of hating all of the adaptations of it for sort of various reasons, and kind of wondering why the story had never been told from a trans feminine perspective, because if you don't know, it's about a character who halfway through the book transforms into a woman. So, and then kind of has to deal with all of the social, societal consequences of that, and also lives for hundreds of years through from the 1800s up until the mid 1900s. So there's a kind of breadth of like cultural and gendered experiences that happen in the book. And when I first got to Egg, I was kind of splitting my time between doing a lot of exploring and rereading the book and doing bits of songwriting and like weird laptop production, which you'll hear in a minute. And yeah, I suppose like Egg really appealed to me as a space to start thinking about this project because of Orlando's relationships with the landscape. And like the more I sort of reread the book, and the more I kind of thought about like who kind of my Orlando was, the more I sort of realized that, alongside her gender transformation had to come like a sort of more, almost like a more fundamental, like more radical, like more psychedelic, like even more psychedelic sort of transformation, like a true, like, because the Orlando of the novel, like, never really shed her colonial baggage, like ultimately, the book opens with like this like quite sort of intense and disturbing image of her like practicing sword fighting on like the dangling head of like someone who had been like killed at the British colonies, who was like killed by her dad in the British colonies, and had the head like dangling in the attic. And like the I think Orlando's relationship to empire has to kind of transform as well. And also Orlando's relationship to landscape. Like she has like, bless her, like a very like kind of intensely like sort of Tory idea about like the English countryside. And Egg was such an interesting space to think about like radical reimaginings of what like rural life looks like and what the countryside can look like. So anyway, hopefully that made sense. That felt like a bit of a ramble. But anyway, I'm gonna Evie is gonna roll the tape in a second of one of the songs that I wrote on Egg, and to kind of paint a picture of what's happening in the narrative at this point. This is kind of very, very shortly after Orlando's transformation. She's kind of spent some time like living out in the desert, and now is like coming back into I guess like English society on the boat. And like there's this very hilarious image of like her like sort of like lifting her like skirt for a second, and then like a sailor like turns around and like almost falls off the rigging. And I suppose it's like a moment in the book where I see her like sort of reassessing her relationship to power, like what sort of power, you know, what power are you losing, but also what power are you gaining? And yeah, I think Evie can roll the tape and you'll get the idea.
Okay, just give me a thumbs up so I know that you can hear it when I play.
I lift my skirt and sailors lose their footing. Think of his wife and children. For an ankle they could lose him. I've drawn my final sword, said my final insult, led my final army, worn my final medal. I'm horrified to have such a low opinion of a sex I once belonged in. Spent hundreds of proud years in. But who really has the power? Sure, men can make the offers, but ecstasy in womanhood came with my first refusal. Farewell to the need to control, to martial ambition, to shaping the world in my image, and giving to exalted raptures of solitary being. Love and contemplation, praise God that I'm a woman. Now I feel Sasha's love. Had she felt it? And now I feel Sasha's love. Has I felt it? And now I feel Sasha's love. Has she felt it? Now I feel Sasha's love. Has she felt it? Now I feel Sasha's love, and she felt it. Now I feel
Thank you. It's definitely a sort of rough around the edges demo idea, but I kind of wanted to play the version that like I actually made while I was there with my like slightly dodgy vocal text. Yeah, I suppose like, we can probably move on to the sort of question zone. I've got lots more to ramble about, but I'm sure stuff will come out as well in that.
Thanks so much, Rubie. And that was also totally brilliant, kind of like being with you on a kind of derive around Mayfair. I feel connected to the Bloomsbury set.
Yeah, that's the vibe. Yeah. That's absolutely the vibe. Yeah, I should have gone to Bloomsbury. My God, that would have made way more sense.
Well, it's close enough. It's close enough.
Yeah, not too far.
But that was yeah. I mean, it's kind of yeah, it just made, you know, it's just a kind of, it was, I remember the kind of, the excitement kind of when everybody kind of agreed with you kind of on the panel that it was time for Orlando to kind of be rethought. And it was almost like everybody was like, oh shit, yeah. So
yeah,
it definitely,
sorry, go on.
It was just a kind of, it was just the kind of like, yeah, pennies dropping kind of all over kind of like, yeah, the people that were kind of reading kind of what you'd kind of written. And it was like, there was a kind of urgency kind of to, yeah, for the work to kind of happen. Richy, do you remember that?
Yes. I do. No, it's totally yeah. How is it like? How it sounds like you were thinking through some really complex. I was kind of wondering there actually when you were saying about things that popped up on reading it again. Like have you been thinking through like kind of subvert, or are you, or how are you like thinking through kind of subverting some of the kind of issues in the text that you think are popping up? And so I also kind of just say like I really think you just such a beautiful voice to listen to. Like you're such a theatrical. Like it feels like live when I hear the record, and I know that's it's just it's super engaging. I've got more thoughts or I had questions about that, but yeah, just kind of want to know how you've been thinking about the shape of the work since, you know.
Yeah, no, it's totally it's a really sort of big question and a really difficult challenge, and like I realized quite quickly that I'd had to let go of any, you know, that it was much more exciting to let go of any idea of it being like a particularly faithful adaptation, and like about like borrowing, you know, what it is that's animating and what's exciting. Like, you know, like there's loads of shit in the book that's about like Vita Sappho West's house that I don't give a shit about and stuff. And like there's like I suppose, yeah, like, and it's something I've like been thinking a lot about in my writing for a long time is and increasingly like more and more every month, like, and you know, more and more as the sort of like world has changed and become, you know, so fucking intense in the last few weeks. Like, you know, where is kind of, yeah, where is art's role in that, and where is song's role in that, and it is like this idea of transformation. It's like it's something we talk a lot about in F choir, which is a choir that I sing in, run by my good friend Jenny Moore, who's an amazing artist and songwriter as well. And like she always talks about like singing yourself back to life, and that's always something that sort of resonates with me very strongly. I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but like I think yeah, like letting those themes kind of come to the fore, and like, you know, I like in the book Orlando does I think find sort of like very deep and profound transformation in some ways. And I think like it's just about It's about like teasing out those moments and and also there's a lot of scope, because a weird feature of the book is that it ends like on the publication date of the book, which was the present day, which I really should have reminded myself what it was. I think it's like 1928 or something. And I'm going to embarrass myself, but it's nowhere near that. But you know, I feel like it doesn't make any sense to stop in 1928. So like, you know, I've in the sort of like sketches and ideas I've done so far, like bringing like Orlando as like potentially as an explicitly trans character into the present moment, and like seeing how she would situate herself in the modern world is also a place where some of that like kind of liberty can come.
Oh, yeah, totally. That's such an interesting shift on that. I think that's also a really intelligent way of like kind of dealing with, I think, the things that you brought up is just kind of move it along, right? Yeah, I had another kind of thought as well, like just because I've listened to some of your work and stuff since, is you know, since we first heard it, like about the kind of, because it's such a quite a theatrical kind of like kind of form of songwriting as well. And I know that you'd said or written before and things about like, I was wondering about this text that you're, or the work that you were thinking through this, like, because, and I guess, yeah, mentioning the when playing with Jenny Moore's Mystic Business or whatever, and the F choir, that there's so much performativity in it, you know, like, do you think of like the kind of performance of this, like I know you'd mentioned before, like in Ace Mitchell's Hadestown as well, you know, these kind of like staged works, I guess, in some sense, like how do you think of that when you're writing, or are you busy, do you kind of just narrow down into the song and then kind of think how to do that after?
I'm trying to start with the song. I think like definitely like I mean when I tell people about this project, I tell people I'm writing a big gay musical because I think that sounds really cool. But like, you know, my skill set is, you know, currently I feel like my skill set is in songwriting and increasingly bits of production and bits of and performing, you know, performing gigs is like a huge part of my life, and often does sort of take quite like high drama theatrical form. But yeah, I suppose I see it. So the way I'm approaching this project is first and foremost as a songwriting project and creating like a very strong set of, you know, recorded material. And like Hadestown is a good example of a record that started, was like written by Ace Mitchell, who is, you know, primarily a folk songwriter, and made a concept album first and then it became stage work, you know, working with other collaborators. So I feel like that sort of part might work really well. In terms of the development of the Orlando project as well, like something I'm again like quite early stages, but thinking about doing in parallel is a research project, because I really want it to involve other trans singers. And being a trans singer is like a kind of fascinating and like mind-blowing topic that I could rant to you all day about. But I've been wanting to do a research project specifically about trans voices for a long time. I really love like the trans artists I know who use their voice, like have navigated like genderedness like in such like fascinating and like slippery and like different ways, and also like so many trans people like, you know, don't sing because of the kind of gendered weight that we all place on like on voices. And so like I'm really interested in sort of finding ways to make that space of singing, and you know, and this is something I do in my own work a lot, but is to like make that space of singing like a place of, again, like a place of liberation rather than a place of oppression, like a place of true like radical exploration, rather than something that's like terrifying, you know what I mean? Something that's playful. Does that make sense?
Thank you. That's super interesting. Yeah. Can't wait to see where it goes.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
Chipping away slowly.
That's totally brilliant. Okay, I think we need to kind of head on towards kind of Arun Sood now, if that's kind of okay. Arun, are you feeling kind of ready? Cool. Okay. So Arun is a Scottish Indian writer and musician. Broadly, his varied outputs reflect on and engage with themes of diaspora, heritage, ancestry, language, and memory. With a strong interest in multiform projects and interdisciplinary collaborations, his previous works have combined elements of musical composition, visual art, film, fiction, and archaeology. His project Searching Erskine was released in 2022. While on Egg, Arun worked on the project Brown Hebrideans, made with collaborator Angeline Morrison. The project is a series of compositions for voice, piano, harp, and electronics, which interpret 10 Gaelic songs. Thanks, Arun. Over to you.
Thanks, Leslie. And yeah, thanks to everyone for coming tonight, and also especially to Rubie, Soojin, and Max, because it's just really been quite a privilege and inspiring in a lot of ways to listen to the kind of process, but also you know, the snippets of music. It's really been great. So yeah, a pleasure to be here and kind of speak to my own practice a little bit. So yeah, I mean, thank you for that introduction. As you said, my musical projects tend to emanate from literary and oral and kind of research contexts that revolve around memory, migration, post-colonialism. And the particular project that I wanted to work on while at Sweeney's Bothy, for a little bit of background context before I play some or contextualize some kind of samples, was born out of a conversation I had with the folk singer Angeline Morrison, who some of you may know. And it revolved around the fact that we both had what felt like a really emotional attachment to Gaelic language and song and Hebridean mythology, that was met with a kind of like a block of like inauthenticity, in terms of we'd come to Gaelic as adult learners, and yet, so to speak to my own experience, my mum was a native Gaelic speaker, would sing Gaelic songs in the house growing up. My grandmother would only, like long past now, would only address me in Gaelic and sing me songs. But I kind of had to learn the language later on in life. And as I've learned it, the linguistics and the language kind of fails to have the same kind of emotive capacity as listening to the kind of melodies or the fragments of language that I was familiar with through my family, and Angeline had a similar experience. So the idea was, rather than to kind of delegitimize ourselves or think this is inauthentic, or, you know, this can't actually be folk because we're not grounded in a specific tradition, was actually to embrace the inauthenticity in a way, and to play with it, to experiment with it. So the idea with going up to the Bothy was that I would kind of begin to scratch out different tracks, and these tracks were based upon songs or chord progressions or fragments of language that we had some kind of connection to, whether it be familiar or even kind of research-based, and use them as a real starting point to then explore creatively and see what became of it. And the process of research for the project also came with its contradictions. You know, a glaring example being, so, you know, when I was reading around for the project, there was a Gaelic ballad that I came across, an 1816 ballad by Dugald MacNichol, who was based in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. And the Gaelic ballad was kind of largely about the loss of language, the loss of culture, you know, in his view, relating to the Gaelic context. But the irony being there that this was somebody that was bound up in another system of oppression as well, in the Caribbean. So how do you, rather than romanticize, how do you kind of engage with those complicated and complex histories as well? How do you bring that into kind of creativity, into kind of sonic response in a way? So I went up to Egg to kind of begin to think through some of these ideas, and I knew that I wanted to have a kind of smattering of quote unquote traditional instrumentation in terms of accordion, fiddle, guitars, but I also took various synthesizers and field recordings equipment. I did get in trouble actually for taking 2 trips to the ferry to get all my equipment on board, which I've learned my lesson now. You're only allowed 1 trip. You're not allowed to go back for more. So yeah, that's a kind of a summary of the project that I hope to work on it, and it quick hit a rhythm actually, to the point where now I think I've got like the basis of the musical, or drafts of the musical tracks, and they're now with Angeline, who's going to add vocals, and hopefully that will be the basis of an album. But I suppose something to say is I came up with this kind of bank of samples and sequencers and ideas around certain tracks, but in a way the experience at the Bothy changed it a little bit as well, which was really interesting. It became really generative. I hit this rhythm where I was waking up really early and kind of working with the set ideas that I had, and I would go out for a walk, went to the Massacre Cave. I did do some field recording in there as well, actually. And, you know, every day I would kind of get out as much as possible. And then at night, things kind of took a bit more of a, like, I think, experimental turn, I suppose, is broadly the way to describe it. And it's absolutely taken the project and the album into new directions. So I wanted to kind of share a couple of examples of that tonight. One of them being, so I think this was after a day, I can't remember where it'd been, but it was a stunning day. It was really beautiful. It was calm, it was sunny, and I ended up back at the Bothy. And I did a lot of reading. You know, it was I'm sure everyone else would agree. It's like a fantastic library there. It's just like, you know, you just never, yeah, I wasn't bored at any point. It was just such a compelling library. And I was reading, I forget the name of the local historian, but about the mythology around the pool at the bottom of the Bothy being populated by a water sprite who had kind of come into land and had fallen in love and ceased to go back to the sea. And I had this idea in my mind at the same time I had vocal samples I'd recorded previous to the trip. And I thought, okay, well, I'll play about with it this afternoon. And it kind of became, or I think it has become, a bit of a sort of soundscape interlude in the album. So I'll play a video of that afternoon. And so like I edited the video a little bit, but everything that you hear is just like, that was the live track. It was the live demo draft that I was playing at the time. And then perhaps afterwards, I'll play a file and tell you where it's gone. So just give me 2 minutes. Okay, if there's any problems with hearing or seeing, obviously just tell me straight away. So yeah, this was like recorded in one of the early afternoons, I believe. And it was, as I say, completely kind of generative of the place rather than something preconceived that I'd sought to do. So in short, that was something that like it was sparked by this local history book, and then you know, it must have been a couple of months later. My mum was down visiting me. I don't live in Scotland anymore, but and I was asking her, do you know, is this a kind of common trope in any kind of stories or mythologies that you were familiar with? And we got into a conversation about it, which and I was field recording it. Well, rather, I was actually, that's a very fancy term for saying I had recorded on my iPhone a conversation. It fast kind of transcended into a conversation about her experience growing up, being told not to speak Gaelic in schools, and then sort of coming round to that being a point of regret, and sort of coming full circle to the point where by the end of the conversation, she was starting to sing in Gaelic again, and started reciting kind of verses that she thought responded to this story. And I've since kind of begun to mix some of those field recordings of family conversation into the kind of original spark of an idea I had there, an egg. So I will play you a clip of where it's at the moment. I think it needs a good mix, to be honest, but it probably will feature on the album as a kind of soundscape interlude to the vocal tracks, and provisionally titled Mother's Jig at the moment. So I'll share where it's at now. This is just an audio track. Okay, hopefully this will come through for you now.
All I remember is like she always was in the same bed and that. So like washing, but it was just like a different, they had electricity on stage.
Were you all speaking Gaelic to each other? You were.
Some of the friends in the Gaelic, depending, the parents in the Gaelic.
But you
I mean, we spoke English as well. For me, it went from probably high school, really. There was nobody in my dormitory that had Gaelic, but there was people from Beckylow and stuff who were older. But then we didn't really speak Gaelic with each other.
Where the house? Yeah, so there was also an attempt there to kind of, I suppose, embed a jig time signature, the 1 2 3 5 4 6 1 2 3 5 4 6 into the ambient composition, which seems kind of, I don't know if I think that I suppose that speaks to the anxiety we had of being like inauthentic or somehow not adhering strictly to a tradition or to kind of a musical tradition or linguistic tradition, yet somehow wanting to engage with it simultaneously seemed to lend itself to this this idea. So yeah, that I suppose that's to say that in addition to kind of coming armed in a way with like instruments and samples and sequencers and ideas of what I wanted to do there, it definitely turned out actually to be a really generative process as well in terms of creating new ideas and forming new ideas. And, you know, anecdotally, in terms of the experience, I was also really, really fortunate that my residency ended on the day of the Lost Maps Howland Fling. So I got to go to that on the Friday at the end of my residency. So, which was amazing in so many ways. But yeah, it was like being in this compression chamber, not necessarily a compression chamber because I was out every day, but a compression chamber of kind of like creativity and walks and solitary kind of thinking into this kind of explosion of like sharing ideas and whatnot. And there was one memorable moment where I think it was the Thursday before the Howland Fling began on the Friday that I was I'd hired a bike actually, and I was cycling down towards the harbour area, and I cycled past John Hopkins, who, you know, some of you might know, you know, Mercury Prize winner and recent BBC Proms performer, that, and it was just like this really strange, almost like slow motion experience because he was DJing that night from where he come from. But I think all of that did also kind of influence where the album and the record is going. And I suppose I'll end on that note where kind of some of the more twilight kind of doodlings that I was doing rather than composition was also just working with a lot of samples of kind of singers that my mother or grandmother or Angeline's family had some kind of connection to, and this resulted in this kind of yeah, it's taken it in a different place. So I'll play one of those just to close, to give you a sense. So this was let me just get this right. Yeah, so it was a sampling of Donald MacLeod's version of Arriva Nach Vil Keine Gut. And this was me playing about probably around midnight in the Bothy, having the time and space that isn't usually available to me.
It's okay to feel these feelings. It's okay
Yeah, so thank you for the kind applause. These are all drafts, but I think it's a meaningful note to end on, that like the residency and being on Egg and kind of within the landscape and reading about Egg and also reading about Sweeney, particularly Seamus Heaney's translation while I was there, it's kind of deeply shaped the hopeful album. I mean, I think we're still very much in the process of it, but it's definitely laid the foundation for what I hope it will become. That's me.
That's a lot. Thank you so much. Richy, I'm gonna give one question to you, and then we're gonna push on with BICC to try and kind of like just have moments at the end where there's kind of some shared discussion.
Okay,
So
only
for
one.
you,
But tablet had fashion glay intinach. I just thought it was amazing. I kind of like the word kept popping up through that, which is one of the things I was going to ask you about anyway beforehand. But it's to do with conversation, because like I really feel in the work I've heard yours before and some of this that there's like, you know, it's kind of working archival material, but you know, like it's like in a kind of Margaret Bennett type sense of like actually talking to people, you know, and being with people, and then like folding that back into the work itself, or it being the work, I guess, maybe. And I kind of thought then just the way that you said that, like having this very introspective time that ended with this like explosion of, you know, conviviality or something, like it. So yeah, I don't know. It feels like from listening to some of your work that I wondered how about how kind of conversation, how you think about that through your practice, but then also, my kind of other side of that was thinking, well, what's that? Because it feels like your work has that in a way that doesn't necessarily have to be like lyrical, like or what I've heard before, right? You know, there's fragments of it or little moments of things, but how that might be shaped through the lens of maybe something that's working with a singer, right? Or with Angeline, like if that's that kind of lyricism like changes that in some sense. Anyway, big question, couple of small bits, but yeah, I know like.
Oh yeah, thanks, Richy. Do you know, it's only quite recently, and it's kind of like for the purpose of funding applications, to be honest. So there's maybe like an economics of it, like in terms of like how do you continue to pursue work like this, that I've thought about conversation and oral history as something that I have to like quantify officially or kind of seek ethics approval for, and think about in a preempted way, whereas previously, like with an album I put out, Searching Erskine, it was very much organic conversations with families or family or friends of family, and similarly with Angeline and with my own mother. It's kind of I suppose that felt a little bit isolated from the archival or academic or the kind of history research I was doing. But I think that I've come to realize that there's a bridge there. And sometimes it's a difficult bridge because, like, for the purpose of funding applications, you've kind of got to sort of like quantify it or really kind of articulate it in a specific way that makes it maybe less organic. But it absolutely does inform, I think, most things that I do, is that process of conversation and where conversation might relate to your knowledge that you've gained, or even like kind of the songs that you know through listening or through archives and through books and whatnot. And yeah, I think like the second part of the question, it's going to be interesting, I think, because the way we've gone about this project is that I've kind of got the basis of these tracks now, or kind of several bases. A lot of them I think will be discarded. And then Angeline will have her own kind of take on them and the vocal. Often it's kind of a process by which I will just sound like a single drone, like a single drone note. And then the kind of the Gaelic song and the melody, and that will kind of be embedded into the tracks that I've been working on. So I think the second part of the question remains to be seen where it's going to go. But I'm also quite excited about working like that as well. Yeah, I think there's like a different kind of romance to it in a way, whereby I don't necessarily know what's coming, but but I think it will pose challenges as well, but hopefully it will be something to embrace.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Arun, and thanks so much, Richy. Okay, I'm really sorry to kind of cram that sort of discussion kind of in there, but we should move on to the BICC, who are Kunling Louis, Jacob Fulford, and Riyad Bouzab. The BICC are an experimental group formed by Birmingham Conservatoire graduates. Influenced by internet culture, their work often blurs the lines between different art forms, incorporating music, visual art, video, animation, gaming, and theatre to create surreal and immersive experiences. From blending video games with ancient theatre forms to performing parodies of job interviews, they're always driven by a sense of playfulness and curiosity. The BICC use their time on Egg to generate new compositions by means of game structure, and there was a slight kind of upending of the norms in the sense that 3 of them kind of went on residency. To those of you who've been to the Bothy space will know that that's quite a concentrated presence of bodies. So over to you, BICC. Sorry to we're probably going to run over just a little bit, kind of apologies if anybody has to leave kind of bang on 8, but yeah, you guys, kind of over to you.
Hi, thank you, Leslie. We are the one being known as the BICC.
Hello. So we do lots of funny, silly things that are also serious and very intellectual, but mostly like for our own amusement. It just so happens that so yeah, what did we get up to on Egg?
So we went in with a pitch about Dungeons and Dragons, the game and game theory. The initial idea was that we would control our actions and recorded actions on the Isle of Egg by preparing a game of Dungeons and Dragons and essentially controlling our actions by chance and dice. And then live it out. Yeah. But essentially we reversed that. So we ended up just enjoying our time so much that we lived just day to day and just kind of took everything in and ended up leaving and are in the process of creating, well, I'm in the process of creating a Dungeons and Dragons game based on Egg, based on the Isle of Egg and our experiences. And our work that came from that is essentially a heightened, playful kind of melange of what we perceived on Egg, and it's kind of just developing as this weird thing.
It seems like it's something that we're going to continue with and probably develop a little bit further.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say, just on a personal note, part of what I experienced on Egg was realizing, like, Henry David Thoreau, whilst a little bit sanctimonious in Walden, is essentially right about the inherent beauty of just living intentionally and experiencing something other than being in Birmingham city centre on my phone, not wanting to be in Birmingham city centre. So yeah, it's taught me a lot about, you know, cities. Right. Cities are pretty horrid in a way. Yeah, you've kind of ruined cities for me. So yeah.
Me too. If we're pressed for time, should we just show our Egg work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Shall we show it first and then maybe talk about it a bit more?
Yeah, we'll show it. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen. Let's just open it up first. Let us know if you can hear it, by the way. Thanks. I hope you could hear it. I actually didn't. I couldn't see anyone. Okay, cool. Because Kunling did a lot of the music, so it was really nice.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was based on a lot of our heightened, like memorized versions of our experiences. So there were a lot. We went towards the middle end of September. Sorry, let me get you a frame. And there were a lot of crane flies. Every day in the bed, there were like daddy long legs in the bed quite often every evening.
It became a whole thing of all three of us.
Yeah, like
trying various ways of capturing the crane flies, transporting the crane flies outside, and then just coming back in. So we spent a lot of time talking about crane flies.
And then a big part of it was me and Riyadh once mistook the Northern Lights for ghosts.
I genuinely thought we were
Yeah.
I had never experienced anything like. I had only just seen the night sky with actual stars in it. So we experienced the Northern Lights, and I thought we were going to I thought we were going to die.
Yeah, he thought we
I
were
had
gonna
no
die.
idea what was happening. And
Kunling was ill with a bad fever for about 3 days and bedridden.
Yeah, I was actually ill, and then we thought, let's just make something from that. Just
Yeah,
kind of-
Let's create something from those that basically our day-to-day life in Bothy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
Do you want to talk a little bit about
So-
the music?
The music. Well, maybe the whole process. We kind of aimed for. We had a plan at first with a D&D idea, and then And then we thought, why not embrace a more kind of, process-oriented approach, where we just start creating something and then see where we end up. And I think we ended up with a mix of both, where we kind of, on Egg, we just explore the Isle, had a great time, filmed loads of footages, and we're not sure where we're going, but then we did have this idea of kind of wanting to put everything together into a narrative, and still staying faithful to the idea of a game, and trying to kind of come up with a sort of abstract version of some sort of a game video, which was really fun. So yeah.
Also, I hadn't been to a beach since I was like 7, and I drank so much seawater. It was great. I had like a really great time with the ocean. It's fantastic. Just like sand fleas. I'd never seen sand fleas. I didn't know what sand fleas were, and I spent a way too long just picking up seaweed and just watching them hop away, whilst you like sat like way back and just like kept an eye on me.
Yeah,
to make sure I didn't like go too far. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of it's very enjoyable to hear the kind of the various epiphanies that kind of happened. And I think it's kind of like it's a really good kind of illustration of the kind of Arun's kind of extreme focus that sort of took hold. But also, I think, what was it, Max? You said that you were kind of like burning the candle at both ends, kind of like there was a kind of just and then alternatively, you guys kind of couldn't resist the kind of the external, and you kind of you negotiated amongst yourselves that you would have to make a work when you when you went home. And I think these are all like, all of these kind of like responses are kind of completely, like, I don't know, that they're familiar to me, because at some point there's always a kind of panic that you're doing it wrong, you're doing the residency wrong, but you never are, like it's always right. but I think it's kind of like there's a kind of sense of the kind of like, I don't think I'll manage to kind of like wrap this up, and maybe Richy, you can kind of might have something better, but the sense of kind of like of travel and kind of time traveling, and kind of almost like this sort of kind of communing with the kind of with voices or kind of entities, and even the kind of sense of the kind of northern lights kind of makes it kind of extraterrestrial, kind of in a kind of
aliens,
kind of there's just a sort of like, there's the breadth of kind of the work that you've all kind of presented is kind of is kind of epic, but there are so many kind of like threads, and also there's evidence of kind of the location, but there's also kind of like it's only kind of an essence kind of in the work, because your kind of practices kind of like shine kind of through. So I mean, it's just been it's been a brilliant kind of couple of hours. Kind of thank you kind of so much. Richy, do you want to kind of like, is there anything that you want to kind of sort of just throw in? And then if anybody's got like a burning kind of, actually I should probably open up to the kind of, I know the audience, we're kind of like, we're slightly overrunning, but maybe actually, I tell you what, does anybody from the audience kind of want to kind of like dive in? Because
can I ask a question?
Absolutely, please.
First of all, thank you so much to everybody who shared about the experience and the things they made. Being visually impaired, I love sounds, like different varieties of sounds. When I go to a new place, I basically can see that place through the sound. So it was so interesting to see how every piece of music, or let's say audio, actually gave me a sense of different parts of like the island, I could say. Like I just wrote this in the chat, like I even like the color contrast and the large font in the, I think it was like the last video that was showed. I've recently just started playing D&D, so it's always nice to see that there is like it's becoming more accessible. I even found out that there is a D&D box set that's old Braille. One of my friends in the blind community told me about that as well, which is really, really cool. And so yeah, it was really nice. But when you started saying, oh my God, sand fleas, I started wondering, okay, if I did get accepted into residency, I don't know how my guide dog is going to feel about those. Since he follows me everywhere, but just seeing the pictures of the island, it was really, really beautiful. I wanted to ask how accessible the island is, or like how easy it is to just move around or just walk around.
I can offer it that. So there's, you know, because there's 110 people that live there, and there's maybe cars, I guess there's, you know, maybe 50 cars, but there's no kind of, everybody's driving at a kind of pace that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I think you and I are maybe going to have a conversation kind of like separately, like Zine, but I think there's, you know, it's yeah, like we should probably talk about the kind of the accessibility kind of that you need, but I think it's a kind of, yeah,
it's okay. I was just curious because I was sent information about the residency by my supervisors, who said, you know, why not, you know, apply, which is hopefully what I'm going to do this week.
So why don't we kind of take up those kind of conversations kind of separately,
cool.
And then if anyone else wants to kind of like dive in with the most burning question they have. Nobody's burning. Okay, so maybe kind of on that note, I will simply kind of like accept that we've overrun by kind of, you know, 7-8 minutes, but I think it's been worth it. And I'd like to thank everybody that's kind of presented, and everybody that took the time to kind of go to Egg and kind of and share what they've kind of made, and also continue, you know, kind of sort of thank you for kind of continuing to like work on the pieces that you've kind of that you took with you and that have kind of like been kind of influenced by your kind of time on residency. I'd like to thank Richy for kind of like his time as kind of one of the selection panels, but also kind of joining kind of tonight in the kind of discussion, and Evie, who's kind of like done magic with kind of Zoom, and also to kind of the audience that's kind of joined us. It was really great to kind of have you. Thank you so much. And yeah, please watch out for kind of more of the events that Bothy Project kind of is running through its public programme, but also there are more kind of residency opportunities kind of coming up. So if anyone is kind of keen to go, then it would be great if you kind of kept an eye on our social media for opportunities. But thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was so nice meeting everyone. And yeah, hearing the amazing work.
Brilliant.
Take care.
Thank you. See you later. Have a good evening.